Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the NARM Training Institute. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. Hi, Transforming Trauma listeners. Do you want to join the international NARM community in support of trauma-informed care? If so, please consider joining us to become trained in the neuroaffective relational model. We are excited to offer 2 starting levels of professional trainings designed to support those of you working with clients or populations dealing with the effects of adverse childhood experiences and complex trauma. The Level 1 online NARM Basics training is a psychoeducational training designed for helping professionals in a variety of fields, such as mental health professionals, substance abuse counselors, educators, doctors, nurses, other healthcare providers, coaches, and more. The Level 2 NARM Therapist training is a comprehensive clinical training designed for licensed mental health professionals, as well as current mental health graduate students and clinical interns and trainees. For more information on these NARM trainings and to apply, please visit www.narmtraining.com/schedule. And now for our interview. Donna Jackson Nakazawa is an award-winning journalist and internationally recognized speaker whose work explores the intersection of neuroscience, immunology, and human emotion. Her mission is to translate emerging science in ways that help those with chronic conditions to find healing. Donna has written several books, including Childhood Disrupted, and her latest book, Girls on the Brink, Helping Our Daughters Thrive in an Era of Increased Anxiety, Depression, and Social Media. Girls on the Brink was named one of the best health books of 2022 by the Washington Post and is available wherever books are sold. In this book, Donna explores today's growing adolescent female mental health crisis. Please enjoy this conversation with Donna Jackson Nakazawa. All right, I'm sitting here with Donna Jackson Nakazawa. We are so happy to have you here on Transforming Trauma. Welcome.
Such a pleasure to be here and talking about one of my favorite topics.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you. So the first question that we usually start with here on the podcast is, what would you like listeners to get out of our conversation today?
I would like listeners to come away with an understanding that's twofold. First of all, because my most recent book was about how unsafe our girls feel and the kind of traumatic times we're living through and how it is affecting girls and young women in unique ways. I would like listeners to understand that the antidote to trauma and these times is connection. And there are neuroprotective strategies based on cutting edge neuroscience on how to establish that sense of felt safety for girls who are growing up in highly toxic times. So that's part one. And part two is that wherever you are in your story, as a parent or an individual, it is never too late to begin healing. And there are more ways to begin that process now than ever. And of course, I teach and write about that too. So we're in the right place today.
Oh, and I just felt my heart really open with that part too, because so many of us are in different spots in our journey, and it can feel like, oh, I missed out, or I'm too late, or all of those thoughts that we can kind of pressure ourselves with. And that was just so settling to hear. It's okay wherever we are.
Wherever we are.
It feels really hopeful. Thank you for that. I wondered if you would share with us, more about the work that you're doing in the field of complex trauma.
Well, most recently, what I have been specializing on are really speak to the two things I just said. Over the past few years, it's been very, very clear that girls are struggling in a really unique way from a kind of collective, historical, but also present and increasing trauma in the world in which we live. And this gap, this mental health gap between how girls are doing and boys are doing has been growing and worsening. Now, I'm the mother of a daughter and a son. I love boys so much, and boys are struggling too. So let me just be clear about that. But over the past few years, a new body of neuroscience has come out, which shows the unique ways that the developing female adolescent brain handles and processes stress. And guess what? It is only in 2016 that neuroscientists looked at differences between how the developing female brain responds to and processes stress in the environment differently than the male brain. Everything that I've written about, that you've read about complex trauma, about trauma in general, about the role of toxic allostatic loads on development in the immune system and neurobiology and neuroplasticity, all of that has been based on a male model, kind of like everything we thought we knew about heart disease for a very long
Mhm.
time was based on male models. So I don't come to this conversation with a preference for helping girls versus boys. I am the mother of a
Mhm.
son and the mother of a daughter. I come to it as an expert in the field and a science journalist who sees this emerging science, who has access to the best neuroscientists of our time, and who spent 2 years talking to them and to girls. And I don't want to see this understanding left out of our cultural lexicon and our conversation, because girls and this can help us to help them.
I really appreciate you saying that, and I'll just say on a personal note, I too I'm the mother of 3 boys,
Oh,
and I'm thinking, at some point in their lives, they may be a partner to a female, so I want
that's right.
I want to raise them in a way with this understanding, so I really appreciate you.
And it's not just that, it's also that boys need to understand this felt sense of unsafety that
Yeah.
is encroaching on girls because of the times in which we live, because of social media, because of historical misogyny. It's all escalated and built upon itself into a felt sense of unsafety that's magnified and amplified across our culture in every way. And it's by understanding that that we begin to see young men also understand their history of toxic masculinity and be able to be in real and meaningful and deep relationships with girls and women, which is what they need and want as well, right?
Yes.
We don't want anything less for them.
Yes. Yes, you've named that's I love that. Thank you so much. We don't want anything less for them, and that's so, so important. So, thank you for that. So, share more about what you're doing in the field. I know you've written books, there's lots of work that you have out, but how did you come to this place where you're at?
Well, I tell my kids that I wrote 7 books at the kitchen table, in
Mm.
between. I mean, there is no buffer between my actual lived experience and the books that I write. So most people know my book, Childhood Disrupted. What they don't often know is that is maybe book 4 or 4, I think, or 5. And many people know my book, The Angel and the Assassin, which is about the effects of trauma on neuroconnectivity and the brain and how the brain responds to chronic stressors in a way that changes synaptic connectivity and how that's connected to the most intricate workings of our thoughts and our immune system. And then my most recent book, which came out in the fall of 2022, Girls on the Brink, is looking at this through a female centric lens for the reasons I stated earlier. But then I have a separate life in which I lecture and teach at universities. And one of the things that I teach is about the power of narrative writing in the healing journey. And so I really love what I do. I love teaching the power and promise of narrative writing and writing to heal as a vastly underutilized tool in the trauma
Mm.
healing toolbox. And we now have a very good and robust body of research showing that even a 6 or 8 week program with targeted, finely tuned questions that stack up in a journey that helps us to recreate our own inner narrative of who we are and who we've been and the resources that are available to us right here inside of ourselves, and how using this in a skilled way can completely shift our inner dialogue to the very one that we might wish we had had coming of age, growing up.
Mm.
So, this is a really discrete set of steps and strategies. And recently, I've been able to take my 8-hour program, which I've taught at universities, and put it into a weekender course that takes like 2.5 hours and just get it down to like its true essence because we're all busy, right?
Mm.
These are tiring times. We are all busy. We are tired. Many of us feel just a sense of overwhelm or apathy, or I can't do one more thing, one
Right.
more healing thing, one more email, one more phone call to return, make one more doctor's. We're all there. The past 3 years have mounted on top of all kinds of other cultural issues around healing. So, this is just my newest offering to try to help get through that wall between where we are and where we within us hold that infinite possibility for being in a very different place. And I don't promise to hold all the answers. I don't promise to deliver something that is the only thing one will ever have to do. But because I think we can agree that healing from trauma is lifelong, there is no, I jumped from this lily pad to that one
Mm.
across the turbulent seas, and now I'm in the land of that was then and this is now.
Right.
We know enough about trauma healing to know that that brain, that psyche, that soul, that interior dialogue that came to be through trauma in childhood or adult PTSD, that healing is something that increases over time and its effects increase powerfully over time in a snowballing effect. But we are always in the process. And I think that writing teal and narrative writing and the program, the weekender program, Breaking Free of Trauma, I put my whole heart into this as a tool that I hope helps you jump 10 lily pads.
Mm.
That's the hope.
Mm. I read, I'm not sure if it was on your website or where I read this, but I read sort of a synopsis of your work that your mission is to translate the emerging science in ways that help those with chronic conditions find healing. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think that we are in a time of chronic conditions. I've been writing about chronic conditions and the intersection between chronic illness and one's interior narrative since I wrote The Autoimmune Epidemic a long time ago, a book that many
Mhm.
of our older readers might know. And that intersection, and now, of course, we're living in a time with even more chronic illness rates of depression and anxiety, PTSD, long COVID, all kinds of immune mediated disorders way beyond that original reach of where we thought there were 80 autoimmune diseases. Well, now we know there's so many more. So, chronic illness, what do we mean when we say that? Let's define it. We mean a condition that is recurring, that interferes with your daily life in a way that requires you to manage your thoughts about it, manage your actions around it, whether it's how you eat or the exercises that you do, discrete stretching for, a neurological disorder, or whether it's how you work with depression or anxiety or PTSD. It is very hard to look around and find someone without a chronic condition, right?
Mhm.
It's really hard in our world today. So, to have the privilege of being able to be a fly on the wall and sit in the top labs in the world or the top clinics or with individuals who are sharing their journey with me, whether it's through chronic illness or depression or anxiety or suicidal ideation, or girls who are sharing their journey with me through not wanting to be here, not necessarily wanting to die, but also not wanting to be in
Mhm.
these times and on this planet that we have created for our children. It profoundly moves me. And it's a privilege to be able to take that neuroscience, that public health understanding, those revelations from neurobiologists and immunologists, psychiatry, even, well, there are a few really good psychiatrists out there, psychotherapy, and having reported in this lane for 30 years, to have that understanding, that depth, those deep, 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 deep legs in this arena, and just start with what is new and powerful layered on top of all we know in a way that I hope means someone will finish a course that I've created or finish a book that I've written and go, okay, now I'm here. Now I'm here. I was there, but now I'm here. That is something.
Mhm.
That is something because I think it's what we're all looking and hoping for. Not, I'm not offering anything in a mystical or, done kind of way, but I am putting things together in a way that I hope in my deepest heart takes people to a place in their journey that is significantly different than where they were when they began looking at that piece of work.
Mm. And that just makes my brain go to, okay, so how did you get here? Like, how did you get doing this, what you're doing? Because it's fascinating, what you've written and the explorations. There's been many. You've named several books and you have courses that you've put out. So how did you come to this field? Like, what brought your interest here?
The origin story is pretty complicated.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Well, let's say that we all, in part, come to our origin story certainly through what happened to us, and also coupled with what skills or passions we were led to or made aware of, or maybe even a little bit in our DNA, right? So I'll take it from those two perspectives. Certainly, I grew up in in a way that at that time we would not refer to as childhood trauma, right? Because we hadn't really gotten there. But when I was a child, my father died very unexpectedly after a minor surgery, and there was a complication, and he died very unexpectedly. He was supposed to come home, and he didn't come home, and that changed a lot of things in my family life, as it would in any family life. My 3 older brothers and I was 12, had to get jobs. We had to help our mom who, was understandably completely undone by this experience. We had to deal with the fact that our wider family my father's family began to fight over assets, and we were in the newspaper business and really tear each other down, including my mother, and witnessing that kind of interior infighting and not having my father there as a kind of a buffer around it. And just, let me repeat, not having my father there, suddenly one day gone, and surviving adolescence through some really difficult years that changed me. It's never really left me, those 6 years of being almost entirely on my own to figure things out. I would spend summers living with my brothers, who were older and had gone off, and just trying to find any sense of footing for myself as a young woman coming into the world. So that's just part of that story, and I think it's enough. But also, I had grown up in this very robust newspaper family where my father had been very active in civil rights. He had been active in outlawing slot machines, from his bully pulpit of his column and his newspapers. And, he'd been shot at through the windshield of his car for his role in slot machines. He'd go to the White House and he was head of the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association. And he was always fighting from the time I was born. He fought against Vietnam. We would have Vietnam vets sitting at our kitchen table who he'd sort of helped bring back because they were getting sent back again and again, even though they were wounded. And I actually was very young, so I don't really know all the details of everything he was up to. Some of it is, in print, some of it are stories family tells. But that sense of, we can do this, like, let's do it. I mean, during desegregation, my father sent us all to school in all diverse neighborhood, completely unheard of at the time. But the idea was we just put our boots, on, we get out the door and we try to make change in some way that will help someone beyond ourselves. And also just growing up with the printed word, I'd go into the newspapers and make my own little, unfortunately, these were lead type, my own little newspapers, the guys in the print, they would give me those tiny little lead pieces and you put them together and make your own little
Mm.
news stories. So there was a lot of privilege there, all of which, disappeared very, very quickly and turned into something the opposite of it. So on my mother's side, though, everyone was a scientist. Her father had been one of the founding scientists of the NIH. He had been head of cancer research funding for 30 years. So you would go over to the little rabbit warren of NIH and just like see these people like changing the world, hard science. So as time went by, and I'll wrap this up by saying my lived experience kept bumping into my DNA in two ways. Those traumas deeply affected me on a physical level. And I started to develop a heart problem in my teen years. By my 20s, I had a pacemaker for third-degree heart block. I developed a series of very serious autoimmune diseases, including Guillain-Barré, which I was paralyzed with twice and spent more than 3 months in and out of hospitals learning how to walk again. So all of those things, my experience would rub up against my DNA, but also in a positive way. Like,
Mm.
let's write about it. Let's dig into the science. Let's do this. And just knowing how to dig, knowing how to persevere, writing my way out of it. So you can see that my Writing to Heal
Wow.
and Breaking Free of Trauma narrative writing programs really, really
Mhm.
matter to me. So as things evolved in my life as a professional, as someone experiencing a range of cardiac and autoimmune disorders, and also raising children, my experience also would bang into my storytelling that way. That's how I got
Wow.
here. Mostly hanging out in researchers' labs, but the writing at the kitchen table, in between. And my kids will
Mhm.
say to me, "How did you do that? How did you write 7 books?" Well, you couldn't get an awful lot done waiting for people in cars, sitting in doctor's offices. Both of my
Mm.
children had chronic health issues at various times. My daughter still does. You can hone your passion in small moments over time to do that essential thing, which is harness it for others' healing. If that motivates you, you can do it in small, unbelievably chaotic moments of time. And over time, something happens. A body of work happens.
That is so powerful. I really, really appreciate you sharing all of that, your personal experience, and also this just invaluable gem that in the small chaotic moments we can build something really powerful.
And maybe that also saves us
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's really making meaning out of our story, which, I teach a lot of psychotherapy conferences and I've taught med students and done writing to heal with some of these groups or just, straight up lectured about what we know and don't know. Inevitably, you will find behind the screen of someone's present in the world self that if they have come to a field in which they are doing this, in some way forwarding the healing of others, even in small chaotic moments, that somewhere in their story is trauma, and that in this act, they are making meaning of their own story. And that is, of course, not enough for healing. We talk about making meaning of our story as essential to healing, but
Right.
it, of course, isn't enough for healing because making meaning by serving others and helping others, even in life's most chaotic moments, in your life's most chaotic moments, leave somebody out. I'm wondering if people know
Mhm.
who that is, right? So there's a lot of learning that I've had to go
Mhm.
through and that I've helped other individuals go through
Mm.
where you also realize that that kind of meaning making is just it's worked. It's a survival mechanism. It's served others. It's been a benefit, hopefully, to many people. But that essential self is calling also for healing and attention and care. And that's really where my work centers.
Mm. That's right. Wow. Yeah, you're naming something just that I feel like it's been echoing for me the last couple weeks, actually, this piece of the self. And so I really appreciate you highlighting that. So that kind of helps us understand a little bit more what led you to this work. And I'm sorry, my brain is just kind of I have like three different thoughts and two
We're
questions I want
allowed.
to
We have
ask you.
time. It's okay. Our brains are made to do that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, let's
Yeah, I'm
thank them.
taking it in.
Yeah.
I'm taking it in because you've mentioned your children and how they've been part of your journey, and not that you have to share more than you're comfortable with, but I'm just wondering how parenthood, how motherhood has informed a little bit of your writings and more of that. I wonder if you would share.
Well, I think that for anyone who experienced a lot of trauma growing up, when you yourself have children, I think you go through a process where you want to do everything better, of course, everything differently. If you had a parent who was in some way traumatizing, maybe due to mental health issues or something else, you wanna do the opposite of that, you put on your big girl suit or your big guy
Mhm.
suit or your big whatever, let's be gender
Mhm.
fluid here, your
Yeah.
big human
Yeah.
suit, and
Mhm.
you get busy and you think, "Okay, if I don't do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, if I do the opposite of that," and of course for me, because my father died unexpectedly, and if I stay alive, right? If I stay alive to raise them, I'll have this really figured out. But again, we're leaving someone out.
Yeah.
We're leaving someone out. And I know that raising children has been the greatest teaching of my life because I had to learn. And of course, in Girls on the Brink, there are these 15 neuroprotective strategies for raising girls in today's time, especially if we have had a history of trauma, by the way. That is a huge part of the neuroprotective strategies. They start with you, it just
Mm.
can't be otherwise. And that when we begin this journey, we learn so much about what makes us agitated, overreact, flip our lid, afraid. I call it the vortex. We all have a vortex story, right? And raising children will acquaint you with your vortex, that place where you slip into rumination, self hatred, self doubt, judging self and others, that spin out. That's so hard to get out of, especially if you've had childhood trauma, because it served you then, but it's not serving you now, and it's
Right.
not serving your children. And to be able to learn, this is my vortex, these are the conditions in which I enter it, and to lovingly work on that in yourself with kindness and patience, to really know it, articulate it, learn to see it in the moment while a child, a teenager is standing in the kitchen talking to you. Come out of it, ground your nervous system, because that is what will regulate our child's nervous system. To do the work of learning how to do this in an instant, that is the gift of being a parent, because ultimately we needed to be doing it anyway. So that has very much informed my journey. And my daughter won't mind my saying she's had mental health issues she struggled with. And it has deeply changed my awareness of that millisecond by millisecond attention to
Mm.
myself and to our connection, and how to build connection out in neuroprotective ways. Going back to something we said earlier, starting wherever you are, it's okay. Truly starting wherever you are. And by so doing, to go back to that thing that we never got, therefore, we didn't know how to give and receive, and to do it in a way that changes that intergenerational story, however imperfectly. I always want to bring people back to that.
Yeah.
However imperfectly, to wake up every day and go, "Well, I'm going to take what I'm learning and be a little bit better at this than I was yesterday." That is the gift that we're giving. We're not promising perfection. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to need to make repairs. But doing the work, and I have a new program out called Growing Strong Girls. I honestly think it fits for boys just as well, but which breaks this down into these minute by minute moments of building this safe connection, which includes understanding our own story. And I just feel really excited to have built out something that I would have given anything to have 10 years earlier in this process. And that's the rub, right? Like, you
Mhm.
learn it, you
Mhm.
share it, you hope it has wide applications. Girls on the Brink, the book on which I based this, was a best health book of the year in the Washington Post and Mashable. And, but here's the rub, that means a lot. But you're coming to these things as a writer just a little bit after you needed them.
Yeah. That's how we come to them, right?
That's how, just a little bit late in where you would have liked it to align in your own story. And yet, it truly is never too late. And so I feel really proud of the work that I've been doing the last few years on
Mm.
answering, I think, a lot of questions that have been dangling in the trauma community. How do we use narrative writing? How do we use writing to heal? How powerful can it be? How do we really break down the moment by moment interaction that we have between ourselves and others, and especially in family life and with our children, to create the thing that we always wanted, to both receive and give? That's my mission right now.
You named something that feels so important to me, or at least it jumped out at me, is this theme of connection, both with ourselves and with others, and how important that is. So I appreciate you naming that. And I'm wondering if you have any, I don't know, stories or examples that you'd like to share, or maybe around that connection, or just, in the work that you do.
Well, I think that a big part of it is knowing that connection with ourselves in a way that is so practiced And I use practice as a good thing here, not an artificial practice, but so practiced within yourself that you can call it up, come back to it over and over and over. And really, that's what I teach in narrative writing, which involves a lot of visualization exercises, a lot of using our imagination, using writing, using drawing, using all kinds of different ways to process things through the brain other than traditional trauma therapy. So when we stack these skills together and we're able to identify our vortex, here we are, these are the conditions, I've entered it. Now I can step out of it. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. And
Right.
it's something I can encompass right here in a moment.
Mhm.
But when we are able to, we do the work, we ask ourselves the right questions to be able to identify that vortex in the moment. Okay, here it is again, that feeling in which I feel someone's safety is at stake. I feel maybe my safety is at stake. I feel this is just one example. By the way, everybody's vortex, believe
Right.
me, I worked with so many people, it's unique to them. I feel dismissed or diminished or gaslit in this situation. And I also feel helpless to make change because of whatever systems or relationships or okay, that's my vortex. For another person, it might be something completely different. Oh, I feel no one ever helps me. I feel I'm alone in this situation, and it's because I'm not worthy to others. And maybe that vortex is also, I have a helplessness or powerlessness around this. So everyone has their conditions, their vortex.
Mhm.
They bring up in us a specific feeling. I've had people call it twisty, curled, gnarled thing. Usually I have people combine a felt embodied sensation with also an emotion because that is really powerful. So when we figure out our felt sensation with our emotional, the words that we've worked on really, really hard through my program to figure out what those words
Mm.
are for both the
Mm.
felt sensation and that spiraling emotion. When we put it together and we could go, I'm in my vortex, I'm having that heart palpitating, dismissed blackness. Here it is. We can even look at our vortex, which we may have drawn out somewhere, visualize it in our
Mm.
mind. Okay, guess what? I have worked on these 20 ways to take care of myself, to step out, step away from it. This is my moment to go into love, love, care, care for moi. And here are the 20 ways that I know I like to do this. Let me go here. Oh, I really like, because it's different for everyone. I like to exit the room, go stare at a shard of sunlight on a tree, and imagine my benefactors, the people who I know have loved and soothed and helped me, whoever that might be. And the third thing that is going to work for me right now, I'm going to pick from my list is to spend 5 minutes just writing out these feelings and rip that paper up. Now I'm going to go back in this room and I'm going to regulate this child or partner. Not that this is your work to regulate your partner, but by being
Sure.
regulated, I'm going to be able to be in this moment, not in
Mm.
my vortex, but present,
Mm.
compassionate toward myself, compassionate toward others. And we actually know the neuroscience behind these different methods. We understand that by determining this pattern, this vortex, our go to emotional plus physical rumination cycle, and that we bring the brain stress machinery down. And then when we go to the things that we've learned and practiced, very doable 1 minute practices, and we stack up a few that work for us, which may be different than what work for someone else. We've got to try a lot of them to figure out what does it, and it can shift over time.
Yeah. Right.
These three might do it for 5 years, and now these
Yeah.
three do it. And to know how to go from that awareness that brings down the body and brain stress machinery to know how to do it, how to then bring in that healing parasympathetic nervous system, soothe the nervous system in the brain, come to that sense of embodiment and presence
Mm.
in minutes because we've done the work. That is to me the most powerful thing we can learn as humans. And
Ah.
I'm not sharing specific exercises, or maybe I have. I'm telling you, it's your story. And you have to get on the inside of your own story to know the exercise or strategy
Mhm.
that is your 5-minute freedom exploration.
Yeah.
You have to get inside your own story. And how do we do that? Well, that's what I like to teach are ways to jump over ourselves and past our resistance, which we
Mm.
all have, and do it simply, elegantly, meaningfully, and in a way quickly. And guess what? That's also going to answer any question you ask me about how to connect with our children.
Yeah.
I mean, we have thousands of ways to better connect with our children, but it's going
Yeah.
to have to start there.
Mhm. Yeah, what really lands for me out of what you said, or at least how I'm translating it, is this piece of like really understanding ourselves and our own experience is really going to lead us to, well, what is going to help us in that moment? And it might be different now from 5 years from now or
Yes.
5 weeks from now. And understanding like that needs to be flexible, that when we stay in connection with ourselves and we can stay in connection with how that, whatever flexibility that needs, that I don't know, that just jumps out at me as really important. So,
I
yeah.
think it's where the work begins. Of course, in
Mhm.
raising children, there's so much else that goes into it. We
Right.
want them to feel safe in the wider community, and but that safety starts with us at home, and how we do that in a way that honors who we are. We're not trying to just give ourselves away or become a mommying machine of wonder.
Mhm. Mhm.
Women have gotten that kind of pressure for so long, and we're not trying to do that, but we're trying to find a way where we are building safety and connection in the home so that our child knows they can come and tell us anything at any time, because we know that that is the number one most important thing for girls flourishing is that sense that they can come to a parent, and boys come to a parent, caregiver at any time with anything, no matter how hard, and be seen and valued. And so all the work begins with what we've been talking about, but we can do it at the same time that we're learning dozens of other skills for communication, for hard conversations with our children and others, for building out safe communities for them. I don't want people to come away from this going, well, she's got this one exercise or this one idea.
Mhm.
That's the building block, people. And then you build out from there, kind of like, if you were looking at it, circles, that first tiny circle is you. And then you've got the circle of your beloveds, right? Your family
Mm.
and parents and a spouse or partner. And then you build out to that wider extended family. And then you build to your community. And then you build to the whole world. And we've got to be shooting this connection out with different skills like spokes on a wheel. And those are just evolving sets of understandings and skills and practices and scripts, even sometimes,
Right.
for how to do the work.
Yeah. Well, Donna, I so appreciate you taking your time to share with us what you've been learning, what you've been growing in your own work, and these ways of supporting ourselves and children and our loved ones around us. I really, really appreciate the work that you're doing and how you're showing up.
I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Any final thoughts that you might have? If there's anything else that you feel you'd like to say to our listeners?
I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. No matter how hard it feels right this instant, start right where you are with something small. Pick up from there because there are millions of people who feel the way you feel right this minute. And there are millions of people doing this work, and it may feel undoable. It may feel like you're alone, but by doing it, those feelings dissipate and something new emerges, and you deserve it. You're worth it.
Mm. I'm just noticing how that kind of opens my heart a bit and helps me feel more connected to humanity. Thank you for that. And then lastly, I'd love to know, how can listeners connect with the work that you're doing? You've already named a few of the books, but tell us more about what's coming up soon. And you mentioned the book that just came out a little bit ago.
Yeah, so Girls on the Brink is out wherever books are sold. You can find it anywhere, Google, whatever. And on my website, which is donnajacksonnakazawa.com, also will come up very quickly.
Right.
You will find my new weekender course, Breaking Free from Trauma. You will find my longer Your Healing Narrative program for those who are interested in a longer program. You will find my course for connection with our daughters for parents and educators called Growing Strong Girls. And that is part one of a 4-part series that I'm doing. And obviously, I'm a writer. I'm going to be writing. That's what I do. So I am working on 2 new books and a workbook. And how all that's going to happen is probably at the kitchen table.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for coming and sharing all of your work with us and little window of what the work that you've been doing and for sharing your heart with us. We so appreciate it.
I appreciated your deep and thoughtful questions and also your ability to connect through listening. So I saw that in you, and thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more about our guest and their work, check the show notes or visit us at narmtraining.com/transformingtrauma. Are you working with clients or populations dealing with the effects of adverse childhood experiences and complex trauma? If so, we invite you to consider joining us to become trained in the neuroaffective relational model in support of trauma-informed care. We are excited to offer psychoeducational and clinical trainings for a variety of mental health professionals. For more information on these NARM trainings and to apply, please visit www.narmtraining.com/schedule. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community, connection with you, and changing the world by transforming trauma.